Well, it is good to be back at the home church to preach this morning. I was scheduled to preach last week, but with the passing of my father, Pastor Fry was kind enough to be able to put it off to this week. And I appreciate that. And let me just start out by saying thank you so much to each and every one of you that have prayed for my family and I during this time of loss and grief and sorrow and have reached out by text and Facebook messages. I just want to say a big thank you to you. It is so deeply appreciated. And thank you also to those of you that have sent cards and said kind words and prayed for me during my time of physical illness. And I so appreciate that. You know, it is so amazing how God puts everything together. It isn't the way we plan. It isn't the way we thought it would be. But I'm glad He's still in control. And you know, sometimes when we begin to think about everything that's going on and your mind begins to race, the devil tries to tell you, God's out of control, I'm in charge here. But I am so glad to know my God is still in control. And no, I would not have scripted my last month and a half the way that it was scripted. But it happened, and God was still in control, and I am so thankful that I serve a God that I can trust, a God that I know has my best interest at heart. This morning, I want us to go to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, I've so appreciated the way that Pastor Fry has been working through the book of Mark. I like Mark's gospel. Mark is my favorite gospel. He fits my personality best. He's what I have classified as the ADD gospel. He's in Capernaum one minute and you're in the middle of the Sea of Galilee the next verse and you don't have a clue how you got there. I identify with Mark. I'm not like Luke. Luke is very systematic. He's a doctor. I want my doctor systematic. I don't want them like Mark. But as we were going through the book of Mark, he touched on a story, and then you can't spend a great deal of time on every story, but it brought me back to some thoughts out of Matthew, because we face a lot of questions today. Everywhere you go, there's questions. If you're headed into the hospital, they've got like 8,000 questions for you before you can ever get in. I went down to see my father the Saturday before he passed away, the following Monday. We didn't know he was going to pass. I was just going down to visit, and I hadn't been there in a while because of my physical issues. I didn't want to go and be there because I was a little bit compromised, and so I was finally getting down to see Dad, and when I stepped in the door, boy, they were there with a questionnaire. Have you been here? Have you had this? Have you gone there? Have you done that? And I didn't even study for the test, and I was hoping I got the answers right so I could get in. But you know, really, those questions, while those are important, they're not the most important question. Because I've taken a lot of tests in my day, studied a lot, taken tests, and I've gotten answers wrong, and it didn't change anything, so I flunked the test. Take it again, you know. But this question that we see in Matthew 16, verse 13, is a question we better get right. Because if we don't get it right, it's not just flunking a test, it will cost us forever. Matthew 16, verse 13 is where we're going to pick up. Jesus is traveling with his disciples, and when they were coming to the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And that's a good question, because that's a question that while Jesus is asking his disciples on the road that day, that's a question that is still being wrestled with today. Who is Jesus? In fact, you can go to any town, USA, to any street, and to any person, and you ask them who Jesus is, they'll have an opinion on who Jesus is. Now, there are a lot of characters in history. If I was to ask you about them and what your opinion is about them, you may look at me like, who in the world is that? I don't even know who that is. There are many characters in history, while they make a blurb, they don't make an impact, but Jesus made an impact. And everybody you talk to has an opinion of who Jesus is. And they did in that day, because Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am?" And his disciples reply. Notice the next verse, verse 14. They say, "Some say you're John the Baptist. Come back to life." That's who they're saying that you are. "You're John the Baptist, come back." Why would they think he's John the Baptist? Because the message was the same. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. John the Baptist was preaching that, and Jesus is preaching that. Why did John and Jesus' message match? Because John was talking about Jesus. That's why. So I can understand why some would say, "Well, you're John the Baptist, come back to life." Now Herod was afraid that was what had happened, because he thought he'd gotten rid of John the Baptist. Nothing worse than executing someone only to find out they've come back again. But no. And notice, go on in verse 14. "Some Elias, others Jeremiah." Now, why would these two prophets, why would they think that Jesus, because here again, the message is the same. Why is the message the same? Because those prophets are talking about Jesus. So the message was similar. That's why they're saying, "Oh, you must be one of these other prophets come back to life." Or, notice how that verse ends, "or one of the prophets." You, Jesus, you're just one of many. And I'm here to tell you, as old as that is, it's as relevant as today. Because if you ask people, "Who is Jesus?" they'll tell you he's one of. Now, a lot of times I'll talk to people and I'll ask them, "Hey, who is Jesus?" And they'll make a statement to me, "Well, he was a good man." And I look at them and I say, "Did you really think that through before you answered that?" And they're like, well, what? What do you mean? He's a good man? No, because if Jesus is who he says he is the Son of God. He's not just a good man. And if Jesus is not who he says he is, he's not a good man in my book, because that makes him a liar. So he cannot be just a good man. He either is who he says he is, or he's lying. Now, I just want to go on record, he is who he says he is. I just want to make that clear. Now, some people would say, "Well, he was a good teacher. He was able to articulate his doctrine. He was able to get across his ideology. He was able to teach those that came along, and they were able to espouse what he said because he taught them so well. He was a good teacher, like Plato or Socrates, or one of the good teachers." Some would say he was a great spiritual leader. He was able to help men spiritually, and they bought into it and they followed him. He was a spiritual leader like Muhammad or Buddha or Joseph Smith. Some would say he was just a great leader. He was able to get men to rally around his cause, and they followed him even to the death. He was a great leader like Napoleon or one of the other world leaders. You see, the world has no problem if you follow Jesus. Where they have a problem is when you say he is the only one. As long as he's one of the many, they're on board with that. And in fact, if you look at the history of Israel, and you see when they would fall into idolatry, it was not that they forsake or leave off the worshiping of Jehovah. It was that they worshiped Jehovah, and that it was a combination. When God said, "No, I'm the only way." God said, "I am the only God. You'll have no other gods." That's where Israel got into trouble. And I'm here to tell you that's where we get into trouble today. When you begin to say, "No, Jesus is the only way to heaven." I don't remember where I got it from, but I got a clip of a television show, Oprah Winfrey. I don't know a whole lot about her, but it was her program, and she had all all of these religious leaders up there. She had a Buddhist, and she had an imam there, and she had all of these religious leaders, and each one took the time to espouse their little doctrine and everything. And the one representing Jesus was just a young lady, maybe in her 20s. And I thought, really? That's not fair. Here you've got all these religious leaders up there. Why not Billy Graham or somebody like that, Ravi Zacharias? But no, it's just a young woman. And I thought, oh, this is going to end horribly. But she got up and she began to talk about what Jesus meant to her and how good Jesus was. And she said, I mean no disrespect to the rest of you, but there is only one way to heaven, and that is through Jesus Christ. Something inside of me said, yes, I identify with her. She's my kind of gal. Ooh, did they ever get mad at her? Oh, Oprah got right in her face and said, how dare you have the audacity to come on my show and make a statement like that? And she said, ma'am, I mean no disrespect, but there is only one way, and that is through Jesus Christ. You see, the world has no problem with you following Jesus. It's when you say he's the only way. But you know, really, what the world thinks of Jesus doesn't change your eternal destiny. God is not going to ask you when you get to heaven, what did the world say about me? Because notice what he does to his disciples in the very next verse. He says, verse 15, he says unto them, but whom say ye that I am? The bottom line doesn't matter what the world says about Jesus. The bottom line is it doesn't matter what the church at large says about Jesus. What is important is who do you say that Jesus is? That's what determines your eternal destiny. Now, I like Peter. Peter speaks many times in Scripture. You'll see Peter answered and said, and there was never a question asked. Peter is quick to speak and slow to think. I identify with Peter. Can I get an amen? But Peter gets this one right. Oh, he messes up, but this one he gets right. Notice what Peter's response is. Simon Peter answered and said, you are the Christ. You are the promised one. You are the Messiah. You are the one that has been foretold. You are the Messiah. Now, we miss a little bit of that understanding in our world. To identify Jesus as the Messiah is to say, he is my king. He's my king. Now, we don't have kings here in the United States. A number of years ago, there were funny boys running around with red suits on, and they were trying to tell us how to live, and we had an exception with that, and so we threw them on their boats and sent them home and declared independence. We've never had a king since. And I'm proud of that, and we should be proud of that. But we miss a little by not having a king. I mean, we vote our people in and out. We don't have a sovereign leader that stays there for life. And so we miss some of that, because when you have a king, what the king says happens whether you like it or not. And guess what? You don't get an opinion on what the king decides. So when Peter says you are the Christ, he is saying you are my king. You get to decide for me how I live. You get to decide for me where to go, what to do, how to be. You are my king. And I'm here to tell you, he is still King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He is not up for re-election. He is not suffering with term limits or any other thing. He's king. Always will be. And Peter is saying, he's my king. Is he your king? Because if he's your king, he chooses how you live. If he's your king, he decides, and you don't get a vote on it. If he's your king. By saying he is the Messiah means that he is my master. Now, master in slavery is not well thought of today for understandable reasons, but it was a part of the culture in Jesus' day. There were slaves and masters, and I'm here to tell you the master decides and the slave does. He doesn't get a choice. He doesn't get it decide. The master decides when you get up, where you work, what you do, where you're going to live, where you eat, all the rest of that. The master makes the decision. Is he your master? Because if he's your master, then he controls every part of your life. We want to be his slave, but we want to have a vote, and it doesn't work that way. We want him to be in charge of us and provide for us, but we don't want to have to follow all the rules. And it doesn't work that way. If he is your Messiah, he is your king, he is your master. But I like how Peter finishes that verse. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's not just King of Kings. He's not just Master, but he's my very best friend. He came to be flesh, to dwell among us, to be a part of us. He came to have a relationship with us. And Christianity is the only religion that has a relationship. The rest of them, there's not a relationship with your God. You just do what you're told and that's it. But ours, we can have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm here to tell you that changes absolutely everything when you have a relationship with somebody. I've been married for 33 plus years. 33 plus years. That's a long time for Leah, isn't it, Brother Gene? Yes, poor Leah. 33 plus years. But you know, in my 33 years, I was thinking about this the other day. I have never, in my vows, it does not say that I have to pick up my socks. It's not in my vows. Not in there. I did not say at the altar that I would pick up my socks. So I don't have to pick up my socks. It does not say in my vows that I have to do any chores around the house, take out the trash or do the dishes or run the sweeper. None of that is in my, so I don't have to do it, do I? And if you think I don't have to, you're delusional. I'll sell you a bridge somewhere outside of Phoenix. Okay? Why do I do those things? Because I know it pleases her, not because I have to. You see, the difference between rules and a relationship is you keep the rules now for a whole different reason. Because now you want to keep them. Because I know it makes her happy when I pick up my socks. I know it makes her happy when I dust or when I clean or when I do. And so I do it not because I have to, but because I want to make her happy. And I'm here to tell you that changes everything. When I was in high school, somewhere, Mama, bless her heart, she's in heaven now, so she bought me a pink vest. I don't wear pink. I don't like pink to wear. Now, some men can wear pink and they look good. I just look like a pink thing. It just doesn't work for me. A lot like a Pepto-Bismol bottle or something. You know, it just doesn't work for me. But somehow, Leah saw my pink vest, and she told me she liked it. So guess what? I wore it. I was in high school. Did I take some ribbing? Absolutely, I took some ribbing. Guys laughed at me and pointed at me, and guess what? I didn't care, because I was in love, and when you're in love, it doesn't matter what people think. And I'm here to tell you, when you stay in love with Jesus, it's not hard to do what he asks you to do because you're in love with him. You're in love with him, and so it changes everything. You know, I do what I do because I love Jesus, not because I have to. Not just because it's in here and I gotta do it. It's because he wants me to. And I see that if I do it, it pleases him. There are some things I do because I know it makes her happy. It's not in my vows that I have to buy her birthday presents. It's not in my vows that I have to buy an anniversary card. It's not in my vows that I have to buy Christmas presents. So I don't have to do that, do I? If I want to live long, I do. And I do it. Why? Not because I have to. Because I know it pleases her. You see, there are some things I do because it pleases Jesus, not because I can find book, chapter, and verse. But he spoke to me and said, son, you know what? If you do that, it would please me. Oh man, I am so happy to do that. Why? Because I know it pleases him. And I'm here to tell you, when you're in love with Jesus, when you're in love with him, it changes absolutely everything. You do it because you want to do it, because you know it pleases him. You see, I've met some people in my lifetime that, they had all the personality of a torn pocket and were as huggable as a porcupine. They looked the part. But a long time ago, they had fallen out of love with Jesus, and it was all checking boxes and doing, and just, it was hard to do. Just hard. Oh, I'm here to tell you, if you fall in love with Jesus, it's not hard to serve him. I've met some church members that reminded me of an incident that happened way back when I was a kid. I was probably about 10. I had gone to an auction of an individual that we had known very well, had been very closely acquainted with the Bible college there, and they were selling off all of the estate, getting rid of everything. I had gone because I was a kid and I'd never seen auctions before in Bolivia. They didn't have auctions, and so I was kind of interested in what was going on. But then I began to notice something that happened. That there was a lady standing over here and a guy standing over here. And one particular item came up for auction and she bid on it, and then he bid on it. They were husband and wife. And then she would bid, and then he would bid. And they were getting madder and madder at each other. Finally, the lady yells across at the guy and says, would you stop it? I want that. And he yells back, you stop it, I want it. Oh, they were husband and wife, but they weren't in love. No, love had gone out a long time ago. And you know what? I've met too many people in church that have fallen out of love with Jesus. It's all about you stop it, you stop it, you stop it. When that's not what Jesus is all about. He's about being so in love with him that you don't care what anybody else does. You just serving Jesus Christ. And you're so in love with him. I'm here to tell you, when you fall in love with Jesus, it changes absolutely everything. No, the rules don't change, but the reason you keep the rules changes. It's because you love him. I love the way one songwriter put it. He said, tell me not of heavy crosses or of burdens hard to bear. For I found his grace sufficient makes each burden light appear. And I love to follow Jesus. Oh, I'm here to tell you, when you fall in love with Jesus afresh and anew, this is not a hard way. It's not a drudgery. It's a pleasure. No, that doesn't mean you won't have bad days. It doesn't mean you won't have dark times. But if you fall in love with Jesus, it makes it so much easier. And I'm here to tell you, if you're living this morning and you don't know Jesus as your Savior, you don't know what you're missing. He's the greatest, wonderful, awesomest thing in the world. But maybe you've been serving him for a while and you found it's become hard. Maybe it's time to just stop and fall in love with Jesus afresh and anew. Who is Jesus to you? Is he just one of, or is he the Christ, the Son of the living God, your very best friend? Thank you.